Okay, so, like, are you ready to take a trip back in time to when science was, like, this big, exciting thing?
Oh, absolutely.
We're going way back to the 50s and 60s, diving into this super cool book, The Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments.
Mm.
You see that cover? Like, bowling, beakers, explosions, it's got it all. And it
Hmm.
promises over 200 simple experiments.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like a snapshot of a time when having a chemistry set at home was, like, the coolest thing ever.
It really was a different era. I mean, this book wasn't just some random thing. It came out right after World War II, a time when, like, science and technology, they were seen as the answer to everything, the keys to a brighter future, you know?
Right. Like,
Yeah.
science is going to save us.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
chemistry, especially, just captured everyone's imaginations.
Totally. And this book just dives right into it, showing how chemistry is in everything around us. Like, one thing that really jumped out at me was how it talked about, using chemistry to grow more food. Because back then, the world's population was booming, and people were worried about, like, whether there would be enough food for everyone.
Oh, for sure. That was a huge concern back then.
And this book was like, hey, chemistry can solve this.
Right. Like a magic bullet almost.
Totally. And it wasn't just food, right? They also talked about how chemistry was leading to all these amazing new medicines.
Absolutely. Like, think about penicillin that was revolutionizing medicine back then.
Exactly. It seemed like chemistry held the answers to so many of the world's problems.
And the coolest part for me is how this book, it didn't just tell you about chemistry. It was like, hey, you can do this too.
Right. Like, be a scientist in your own home.
Yeah. They wanted you to set up your own laboratory right there in your house.
And not just some, like, make-do thing, but a real lab.
Yeah.
With beakers and test tubes and, well, they showed you how to, be creative and juiced up around the house, too.
Oh, I love that.
Like, get this. They suggested using olive jars as beakers. Can you imagine a chemistry book today saying that?
No way. Health and safety would have a field day.
Right. But it speaks to this whole DIY, hands-on spirit of the time.
Totally. They weren't afraid to experiment and they wanted you to be a part of it.
Exactly. And to get you started, they, like, break down all the basics of chemistry in a way that anyone can understand. It's like they're saying, okay, get ready for an adventure in the world of atoms and molecules.
Yeah, and the way they explain it all is pretty fascinating.
Right.
Elements, compounds, the periodic table, acids, bases, even salts. It's surprisingly thorough.
It really is. They even suggest, like, actually tasting diluted acids and bases to tell them apart.
Oh, yeah, that. It's like, can you imagine that today?
No way. Someone would call I don't know, the science police or something.
Right. But, well, back then it was like a way to experience chemistry, to really get a feel for it.
That's a really good point. They wanted to make it relatable, even if their methods wouldn't exactly fly today.
Totally.
And speaking of making it relatable, can we talk about the illustrations? They're like so classic 1950s.
Oh, they're amazing.
Right. They're charming and actually really helpful.
Yeah.
Like, they have these step-by-step drawings showing you exactly how to set up your home lab.
Yeah.
There's even one showing you how to bend glass tubes. Like, whoa, danger.
I know, right? But back then, glass blowing was a pretty important skill for scientists.
It's true.
So the book, it was like they were giving you all the tools and tricks you needed to be a real scientist on your own.
That's like they were saying, go ahead, explore, discover.
Exactly.
So cool. Okay, so let's dive into some of these experiments because there are some really wild ones in here. Like, one that caught my eye was this making a hand balance experiment.
Oh, yeah, that one's fun.
It just seemed so simple, but then I realized, like, wow, they're teaching you about weight and measurement and all sorts of cool stuff.
It's a great example of how they took a really basic idea and used it to explain a really important scientific concept, like building a balance scale out of stuff you could find around the house, tin cans, string, whatever. It helped you understand weight, measurement, even like the center of gravity, all that cool stuff.
Right. It's like they were sneaking in the science while you're having fun.
Exactly.
And then there's the one where they show you how to make hydrogen gas. Talk about a dramatic demonstration.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
I mean, they even have you test if it's flammable.
Which, it is very much so.
Very much so. But, of course, they emphasize doing it safely.
And that's important to remember. Even though their safety standards were, shall we say, a bit different back then,
A little bit.
they still wanted to make sure you didn't blow yourself up.
Which is always good.
Always a plus.
So, even back then, safety first, kinda.
Kind of.
It's really amazing, isn't it? Like how this book takes, these complex things, these elements, and makes them come alive.
Oh, for sure.
Like, they're not just these abstract things on a chart anymore.
Right.
You're actually making them,
Totally.
experimenting with them.
Yeah, it's like, you read about hydrogen, you're like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. But then you actually make it.
Right.
And test if it explodes.
Exactly.
And it's a whole different ball game.
That sticks with you. Right.
Oh, yeah, totally. Speaking of things that stick with you, there's this other experiment. It's about solutions and crystallization.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Tell me about that one.
So they show you how, like, a solution, like salt dissolved in water, it freezes at a lower temperature than just plain water.
Okay.
And it's such a simple thing, but it just shows you how, like, adding stuff to a liquid, it changes how it behaves.
Totally. They actually connected it to something everyone knows, like making ice cream.
Oh, right.
It's like chemistry is everywhere, even in your dessert.
Exactly. They were really good at, like, bringing it all back to everyday life, making it relatable. Like, remember the part about the periodic table?
Yeah.
They start by talking about, the ancient Greeks.
Oh, right. The 4 elements.
Oh.
Air, fire, water, and earth. I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, what does this have to do with chemistry?
I know, right? It seems a bit out of place.
It does.
But then when you think about it, it's actually pretty clever.
Okay, I'm listening.
They're showing you how, like, our understanding of matter has changed so much over time.
Oh.
We went from these, like, really basic ideas to this incredibly complex system of elements, the periodic table.
I see. So it's like a history lesson and a chemistry lesson all in one.
Exactly. It shows how science builds on itself, you know?
That's a good point.
We're always questioning, always refining our understanding. And that brings us to something kind of important about this whole, do-it-yourself chemistry at home thing.
Oh, right. The safety.
Yeah, the safety.
Because, some of this stuff in this book probably wouldn't fly today.
Definitely not. Like, imagine if a book today suggested making chlorine gas.
Oh, my gosh.
Using bleach in your kitchen.
The lawsuits.
I know, right? But back then, well, they didn't know any better.
People were tougher back then. Or maybe just less aware of the risks.
Probably a bit of both.
That's true. We know a lot more now about how dangerous some of these chemicals can be.
We do, and that's a good thing.
For sure. Safety first, always.
Uh.
But, even though we have to be careful,
yeah,
there's still something so inspiring about this book,
Oh, absolutely.
It's like this celebration of curiosity and, like, this can-do spirit.
It really is.
It makes you want to roll up your sleeves and just start experimenting.
Exactly. And, that's something that I think we've maybe lost a bit of today.
You think so? How so?
Well, I mean, think about it. Back then, a book like this, it was like a portal to a whole new world of knowledge.
Because it was all they had.
Right.
Yeah.
But today, I don't know, maybe we're just overwhelmed with information.
Too many choices.
Exactly. And maybe we've become a bit too risk-averse, too.
Interesting.
Like, it's great that we're more aware of safety, of course.
Right.
But have we gone too far? Have we lost some of that sense of wonder, that thirst for discovery that made books like this so popular in the first place?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I have the answer. But it's definitely something to think about.
It really makes you wonder, like, what if this book came out today?
Right.
Would people be like, yay, science? Or, oh no, think of the children.
I mean, we're a lot more safety conscious now than we were back then.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess back then, a book like this, it was like the only way to learn this stuff, right?
Totally. Like, there weren't a million YouTube videos showing you how to do these experiments.
Right. And like some of them probably shouldn't be on YouTube.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But now it's like we've got all this information at our fingertips, which is amazing, but it's also kind of overwhelming.
No, totally. It's like, where do you even start?
Exactly. So in a way, I kind of envy those kids back then. They had this one book, and it was like their guide to this whole world of scientific discovery.
And they didn't have to worry about, like, whether the information was accurate or not, or whether some random person on the internet was leading them astray.
True. This book, it was like their Bible of science.
And it makes you think, like, maybe we've lost something along the way.
You think?
Well, I don't know. It's like we're so focused on, like, getting things right, being safe,
Right.
that we've forgotten how to just, like, play around with ideas,
To be curious.
Exactly. Like, remember that feeling you had when you were a kid and you mixed baking soda and vinegar together for the first time?
Oh, yeah. Like a mini volcano.
Exactly. That sense of wonder, that's what this book is all about.
I love that. So what's the takeaway here?
I think it's about finding that balance, between being safe and responsible,
Of course, always.
but also not being afraid to, like, get your hands dirty, literally, and just experiment.
Exactly. Because who knows what amazing things you might discover. Maybe you'll even write the next golden book of chemistry experiments.
And maybe this time, no tasting the acids.
Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
Safety first. But seriously, folks, if this deep dive has inspired you, go out there, be curious, explore, experiment. Just remember to do it safely and responsibly. And maybe, just maybe, you'll make some incredible discoveries of your own.